Alright, how's it going, everyone? This is Anon. None of this is financial advice. This is for entertainment purposes only. Alright, let me get everything started up. We haven't done one of these in a while, so let's get onto it. I actually don't even see it live, so I don't know if it's actually active. Let's check. Okay, hold on. There we go. So let's get back in here real quick and make sure we got this going. Alright, here we go. Wait till we get some people on and then kind of get started. Alright, let's pull this over. I see somebody's coming in here. How's it going? I don't know who it is yet. Hold on, mate. Do you guys hear an echo? Let me put on the headset real quick. Just. Okay, I found out where the echo is. No echo? Alright, good stuff. What's up, Goat? How are you, bud? The echo was me playing it inside the Discord by accident. But it was just on my side, apparently. Alright, so who we got in here? We got Benjamin. We've missed you speaking in the Discord. I've been busy. Yeah, I've been busy also. I've been doing stuff at work, and then I was trying to basically just kind of go around and deep dive into BBBY's filings and get as much information as I can on that. So, when Moon. Well, we found out some interesting information today on a couple different things. So we can cover all that today, but I think what we need to do, let me go pull up Fintel real quick, and let me pull up Ortex and a couple others. Let me see if we can get, here we go. How do I add that into here? Let's try. See if it will log in. Okay. So we've got a couple things to cover. One of these is the 13 Fs that came out. We're also going to want to do Ortex. Open that up. Oh, poor AVYA. Wasn't that your baby for a little bit there, Dirty? Wasn't AVYA like one of the ones that we were looking at and just all kind of like, I mean, from what I remember, I think I even bought like some like leaps on them just because it was like, this is either going to go to zero or it's going, to the, to squeeze. And it was one of those that went to zero. So we'll get this out. Still a good amount of liquidity. Cost to borrow is still pretty low. Yeah, the board of directors killed AVYA. Yeah, I remember that one. We've got to cover the SPY. Yeah, so here's what I've got on the SPY. And I think this is a pretty, like, interesting thing. So we broke out of this, right? So we had been respecting this down channel this entire time. And then recently, every single time we had bounced, bounced, but tried to break through a bounce there. It dropped down, and then it just went on this run, right? So we've been basically just coming up here, and I think it's trying to fill this gap here at the 420s. Once that gap is filled, I think it's pretty much like game on. Now, granted, I took a couple put spreads around here on this line because I was like, it's either going to break down or it's going to break out. So most of my positions are long, so that was my hedge. I bought a bunch of put spreads that were for June and September down here at this gap here. So that's kind of actually I even bought it. I bought it at 365. So I bought them for around here. So I still think I have enough theta where I'm okay, but I'm losing, just money as it goes up. But that was my hedge. And so overall my portfolio is, better right now because most of my positions are long, but I may, if we hit this gap up here, I may buy a bunch of SPY puts or SPXU or whatever. So let's see. I will never touch an individual stock in my life. Only SPY options from now on. I mean, at this point right now, if you kind of look at the overall history of the SPY, like, if you kind of figure, okay, even if you bought at the peak, right, of 18, or actually this was the peak of 18, right? Even if you bought the peak of there, you're still so much better off, like, in the long run, which is why they kind of recommend that people just buy index funds and just let them sit long term. Now, granted, I think we're going to have a chance to go back and fill some of these gaps down here. I don't know if these ones down here in the 200s will ever fill, but I do think the ones down here, maybe in the 280s, have a chance to fill. This is just, I mean, that would be a devastating, like crash if it got down to this level to fill that gap. So my guess is we're going to be somewhere in the ballpark of here to about here and then start chopping their way back up eventually. It may take until 2024, 2025, but I'm just telling you right now that, unless like World War III breaks out, which, I mean, if the U.S. and China go to war or if, Russia starts using nukes or something, then, we might actually have a chance to fill this gap down here. But, long term, what I'm seeing is this. They had been respecting this, trend or this down channel. It broke out of it. I do think it's just to fill this gap. And then we're going to see more downward pressure because it just, they're raising interest rates. I know they already said that they're going to do probably 25, 25, 25. So there's another, 75 basis points that can go up. And overall, that's going to slow the economy. I think things are lagging. And so that to me at this point shows more downside than upside. If you believe in a soft landing, then sure, you could try to make another run at the all-time high. But, that would be quite the run because everyone's expecting it to go down. And if they were to break out, go for an all-time high again and then break down from there, who knows? But at this point right now, this is the last bear gap we have to fill. So we do have a lot of gaps to the downside still that have never, haven't been touched since basically back here in, what was that, May of 2020. This was the gap from the elections over here that needs to fill. They did fill one gap, I think, here. In fact, it literally touched that gap right here and bounced up that same day. And I was sick that day, and I still am sick to my stomach because it dropped all the way down to like 348, touched that gap, and then just shot up. And it was like, in one day, it went from like down 3% to like up 3%. So it was crazy. So yeah, like that's kind of where I see us going for right now. In the short term, we may come up and fill that gap right there. And once they do that, it's kind of like, I don't see any way that, with interest rates and them trying to rein in things, we could see a move down to fill some of these gaps in the 340s and possibly even the 390s, or sorry, 290s and the 280s. So we'll see, but that's kind of where I see this going. It had respected this, down channel for a while. We'll see what it does now, because at this point, this would tell me by March 6, roughly, we should have either it's going to fill the gap before then or around that time, and then from there it would be basically, who knows. Now, with that said, interesting thing, if it keeps going up into this range, a lot of us have a bunch of ATER shares, which I'll bring up real quick. And that is interesting because we have an earnings here. And this is the date that Armistice can unlock the $2 warrants. All right, so let me get it in here, right? So remember, we were on this point right here, and this obviously broke down from there. So let me remove it real quick. So what we have now, we still had a small gap here at like was that 97 cents or something? It's like, I think it was 97 cents. It didn't show up on gap detector for whatever reason. We do have gaps. Where's the gaps that we left? I think it's so much easier when this thing actually. Do I have to make the width smaller, maybe? Will it show up then? No. Should be on the daily. It should cover that. Anyway, I'll have to go back. But there's, I think, a gap here, and then there's a big gap here where it gapped down. So these are all gaps that probably will need to get filled at some point. And we've talked about this before. Now, the interesting thing was the Armistice thing, right? Like the Armistice, we found out, because one of our concerns about Armistice was they had 6 million shares, and they can only have 9.99% of the company, and they already had slightly under that with the shares. And we were like, how are they going to do this? Because they already have a bunch of warrants at $2 and a bunch of warrants at $3.20. Now, initially we thought they were going to maybe pump it once, sell off, and then pump it again. But in this case, what we found out was Armistice actually has no shares. They sold all their shares. So I'm going to find out if they were able to, because I don't know if you guys remember this day. I'm going to pull it up real quick so we can kind of see it. So the day before earnings, right? Or was it? No, it wasn't earnings. It was the day before they announced their anticipated earnings. The stock shot up to 216, and then the next day just completely sold off, right? Just absolutely sold off. So the question is, that was right around the time they issued the warrants, which was, I basically moved it right. I should put it here, but that's where the line is, where they actually are exercising Rule 4. Maybe if I move this over here, it would give a better indication of this is what they paid, this is where the warrants are, right? But this huge day up, I'm just wondering if they were selling off during this time frame, right? Pushing it down. Maybe they were just tax harvesting. That's what we have to figure out, is if this sell pressure that they had was part of the reason why, or if they just basically decided they were going to short and then push it down and that use their shares to basically sell off. Instead of shorting, they would just sell off the shares they had to push the stock down. And then what I think happened was they decided they were going to start closing their short positions for profit, and that's kind of this spike up that we saw, right? So they just decided, okay, we're going to close out some of these shorts that we have on the books. That's why I think short interest really hasn't been doing a whole lot. In fact, I think it reduced during that time frame. I think we can go to here we go. Let's take a look. Yeah, they had I think at one point close to 8 million shares at from October, and you can see the shares short got lower during this time frame. So what I'm wondering is, did they basically maybe have a short position that they grew, and then they started taking profits once they pushed it down to basically like this level right here, and people started buying in again? They finally found like a level of support. Basically what they did was they just started closing out their short positions from there. And at this point now, they have the warrants that they can go for because they have no more shares. So, yeah, I'll have to look into that. I can't, Ben. Um, I'm gonna have to go through the filings again to double check to make sure that's correct. But it could be it's going to be a clause in there that's going to basically say, hey, you can only have this, or if you go over this percentage, you're going to have to report it. And maybe they're fine with that. We'll see. In the past, though, the reason why I think this is interesting was because Craig Hallam, which is the underwriter, they have a good amount of shares, and those shares were written at the 320 ones and for the warrants, and they were also written at this like $2 level, right? So these guys all got it for 190 and 290 in this case. So for them, they would love the stock price to get back up there so they can probably profit on those. And so the question is Ethereum going to, this is where they can unlock the second set of warrants. So the question is, between now and then, are they going to try to push the stock up? The earnings is right here, which could be a possible catalyst if you saw like some improvements, because we know their margins are going to get better. So if their margins are going to improve and the balance sheet looks a little bit better this time, because there's no more, they're not going to be able to, all the goodwill is basically gone. They already wrote it all off. So from now on, we're just going to see, as long as they don't have, they could possibly have goodwill from the new company. I'm hoping they don't have to write that much off, because basically that would mean that whatever they did, they probably overpaid for, and it's not producing what they were thinking. But in this case, we'll get to see all that kind of stuff probably on this next earnings report. So I'm very curious to see their balance sheet. But the kind of thought is this. Craig Hallam put out a $3 price target on Ethereum, which is right here, right? So if we were to go ahead and just make a line out, and we'll make it, where's $3? Right here. Come on, there we go. Oh, I didn't let go of the mouse. There we go. All right, so if we double click that, oops. Let's make it, I don't know. Can we do yellow? That's too, I'll be able to see that. It's like red. Let's go like there. So I'll put a little text just saying that this is the price target that was put out. Oops, my bad. We'll say Craig Hallam price target. All right. I'll move that over here. So the question is, did they put out this price target to basically get the stock back up in this range so they can basically make some money? So that's kind of going to, that's going to be basically the big question. And if the earnings actually is good, do these guys actually want to keep the shares this time? Because this, if they started closing out their shorts here, and if they actually get to the point where they see, okay, the ATER's turning around, they already have warrants at $2 and $3.20. So they can, they can go up, and they've got access to a good amount of them. So if they think all of a sudden the stock's worth a little bit more, they might actually just close their shorts and then go long. You never know. Just because at this point, we know that the Ethereum's at least claiming in the last earnings report that they think they're going to be positive EBITDA by the third quarter. So if you kind of figured this out, this was fourth quarter first, and then we've got to go back and just take a look when their previous ones were. So We should have one in March, which is this one right here. We should have one in May, which would be here. And we should have the third quarter one. No, that's first, second, third. So third quarter should be sometime in was that, what day is that? August. So sometime in August would be where they're expecting to be positive EBITDA again. So there you go. So in this case, we now have to just figure out, is that the plan? Are they going to try to move it up on earnings? This is when they can unlock their thing. So maybe the stock price starts moving up. At this point, they can start unlocking these sorry, now this is getting confusing with this thing in here, but I'll take it off temporarily. I'll just leave that there. So this is what Armistice paid, and that should be here. And then the warrants line is right there. So this is when Craig Hallam and Armistice would be profitable, this line right here. And once it goes over this line, that's when they can actually start unlocking. So they're profitable. That's their built-in profit right there. And then anything above that is just extra money. Excuse me. Grab some water real quick. There we go. So this is going to be interesting because I think at this point now, we were trying to figure out, are they going to have to dump it down for a while to get rid of those 6 million shares and then move it back up? Now it looks like they can do it in a straight shot. They literally could start running it up here. They can't unlock these ones though, right? So they can't unlock these ones until this green line. So the lower series of warrants, they can't touch until it hits this green line. So the question is, are they going to try to go for this right now after earnings? And maybe that's the catalyst because they need an excuse. They can't just run the stock up right now on no news. Like at this point right now, that would look shady. And it's already been doing shady things for a long time. So that would be too obvious. So they would need some legit good news for them to be able to push the stock price up that much. We did run, remember on the last run, back in here on no news. And it just moved all the way up. In fact, but I think what happened was when I put out that DD and there was some retail chatter, I think they just were like, oh, well, we'll just blame it on retail. This was all just retail pumping the stock. And then this is when Armistice just dumped out, right? So they just started absolutely dumping on this thing. And this is when the bots got nervous and started like telling us what the top was. So I think it's gonna be an interesting little ride for the next couple, weeks, because we've got earnings coming up. It's not that far away. We're already in February. It's coming out in roughly March 8th, so less than a month away. So we're going to be basically, I think, chopping around until we get some news, and then from there, they'll be able to probably put out more price targets too on top of that once they kind of be able to, once the analysts see what's going on. So, okay. Yeah, it's about 3 weeks away. So thanks, Vlad. All right, so that's that one. Okay, what else do you guys want to cover? I feel like that was long enough on the Tyrion. Or do you want me to cover AVYA? Jokes. I'll let you guys start typing and let me know what you guys want. All right, you want to do GNS? Okay. Let's move these around a little bit. Huh. Yeah, I remember we put some pivot points in here. We've got the gaps they need to fill. So gap down here, gap there. I think we did fill one of the gaps, right? Wasn't there a gap somewhere in here that we filled? Yeah, there was a gap here. We filled that on this day right here. And then this is where they're either going to slam it down or this thing's going to rocket up. Will you explain the situation with Armistice? Sure. Wait. So the news was Armistice doesn't hold any shares. Yeah, so they still hold warrants, though, if you want me to go back and explain that. All right, just to finish up. Okay. Armistice owns 2 sets of warrants, and what we can do is we can pull them up right here. So this is Dilution Tracker. A lot of you guys know that we use them. All right. So these 2 warrants right now are not in the play because it's not hitting 15, it's not hitting 25. So these are the 2 relevant warrants right here, right? So you had these March pipe warrants, and then right here you had these $2 regular warrants exercisable in 6 months, which comes to this green line right here, April 4th, right? So you have 2 sets of warrants. And so here's the deal. You've got 7 million shares right here, exercisable over the 320 share price, and then you have 10.5 million shares exercisable over the $2. But remember, they can't touch those 10 million or 10.5 or 6 was it 10.5 million shares until this green line, and we are here right now. Let me just move that over. Okay, so in 3 weeks, they're going to be able to hit this, these warrants right here, the $2 ones. That means that anything over this line right here, this Armistice paid $290 line, which is kind of like turquoise. But that's what they paid for them. So we're still under what they paid for them right now. So for them, it won't make sense to sell anything until they're at least over the $2 exercise price. On these ones right here, these 320 warrants, this keeps getting messed up. All right. These 320 warrants aren't exercisable until the stock price gets over that. But Armistice paid $2.90 for these 320 warrants. That's their built-in profit right there. Just like there's a 10-cent built-in profit right here. So they still have all of these warrants that they can, exercise and, convert them into shares. That's what the deal is. That's what a warrant essentially is. It's like a call option. You got that, Jonathan? So for them to unlock those shares, right now, once they unlock those shares, they can dump them, if they want. Or in the last case, when they ran all the way up here, what they did was they unlocked them and then they dumped them at the top of the market. So they pushed it up as high as they thought it could go, maybe. I still think it could have gone higher, but they took their profits and started pushing it down. Sold their entire position basically in this like range right here, which is much higher than what they paid before. So the question is, are they going to do it again? And so this time, obviously, is not going to be just like this time because the float was lower. There's more shares outstanding now. So this is going to basically boil down to, I think the range is going to be more like the 3 to maybe 5, maybe 4. It just really depends. So it's not going to go as high as it did before, which is why we were telling people if you want to lower your average, you have a better chance of at least breaking even or getting out alive if you're not in this long term. We're going to find out a lot more, though, about Ethereum on this next earnings. Because at that point, we're going to say, okay, maybe they can actually turn it around, or they're going to have to dilute more, and then people are not going to be as happy if they're being long. It's going to be a much longer process, right? So we're going to find that out. We're going to find out their cash situation. We do know that their margins are going to improve only because the shipping rates have been going down. That was their biggest killer, was basically that and the logistics costs. So, shipping and logistics basically were the 2 that were killing them. So you kind of understand what I'm saying about the warrants now? So they own the rights to these things right here. Right now they're holding no shares. Before they were holding 6 million shares that they dumped somewhere in between basically here and here. So we don't know exactly where they dumped them. Did they dump them in the beginning? Maybe they sold throughout, just this push down. We don't know. So at this point, though, we were worried because before they were going to have to run up and they were going to have to dump 6 million shares to be able to unlock any of these because they were going to go over the 9.99% ownership. But now we know for a fact that they basically don't have any shares. That means they can probably run it up maybe in 2 slots, but once they start getting higher, right? So say, for example, they decide that they're going to run the stock up. They're either going to use the warrants right here first ahead of time, getting those shares, and then once they kind of get up to a certain level, maybe like 3, 4, maybe 5, if they get up to that level, they'll start dumping out these warrants right here, knowing that they can basically use these at any time past this green bar. So they'd have full control. They're hoping that retail just goes, oh my God, it's squeezing, and we start buying on the way up, and they'll, at that point they'll just sell into our buying pressure. So we've kind of been tracking this for a long time. We've kind of understand, I think, at least a pretty good sense of what they're trying to do. And so obviously not every ATERian shareholder comes in here and hangs out with us and knows all this stuff. We'll post DD on it, and I think I'll do my best to be very realistic about what price targets I'm looking at. But at the same time, we don't know what's going to happen. Like if this earnings is amazing, and then, which I don't think it's going to be, but if this earnings was amazing, and all of a sudden they go, wait, maybe we want these shares and we want to go long, and then they put out like a $5 price target on the ATERian, then things may change. But at this point right now, we just have to see what this earnings says, because the last earnings basically wrote off all the goodwill, and then they already had dilution in on top of it, and they made an acquisition. So on this one, we get to find out a lot more how that acquisition went, how much, how good the margins have gotten compared to where they were back when we were falling like a stone, this whole range, So we're going to learn a lot on this earnings. I think this one and the next earnings are going to be the two most pivotal going into the one in August, because the one in August is going to basically be where they basically thought they're going to be positive EBITDA. So, okay. Now back to GNS. Sorry. I just don't want to want to make sure you got any questions you have answered. Oops. That's GMS. I think it's this one, right? Yeah, 24.6 million shares outstanding. Okay. I think it's this one, if I remember correctly. Yep, that's their symbol. Okay. Interestingly enough, this is actually holding pretty well in general. This is holding up a lot better than people thought, because literally like a couple weeks ago, people were like, oh, this is just, some like flash in the pan. It's holding its value right now. And you can actually see the squeeze score is actually going up. Now, they did get a fair amount of shares unlocked, which gave the market liquidity again. Okay, so Quick says, GNS, your thoughts on the $10 per share dividend, the spinoff of the resorts property and the machine gun attack. So, yeah, so I think here's my honest thoughts. You have right now a very small float, right? Prior to this, they basically had, I think the float was around 10 million, right? Because he owned basically 9 million shares. So the float was roughly between 9 and 10 million. Have I seen the Wall Street Conspiracy? Yes, I have. Very good, very informative. I'm a fan of most of those people that are basically on there. I follow most of their Twitters, and Susan Trembeth and all them. I think she was very brave for speaking out and, kind of calling out Wall Street for what they were doing. But yeah, so GNS, right? So I don't think that the dividend spinoff is going to do a ton, right? So here's the deal. There's a small float on this thing, right? That means that even if they spin off this dividend, it's really not, and they have to pay out of pocket. Now, it's supposed to be an NFT dividend. They're not supposed to be able to, but the one thing it will do is show a share count. From what I remember, if you spin off something, a dividend, they're supposed to basically go to the brokers and be like, how many shares do you guys need? Which should basically tell them, hey, listen, these are the amount of shares each broker is holding. Now, the question is, how long is retail going to hold this? And will they actually, because when most people found this stock, at least I called it out basically at 47 cents. I got in at 53. And I've taken profit since. I'm not going to lie. I do have some calls to hedge. That I just thought there was going to be some downside because I thought they were going to fill one of these gaps, and they haven't yet. So at this point right now, I'm still waiting on a gap to fill down here at the 420s for me to re-enter, but it's possible. And the reason why I bought some of the calls, and I still have some shares left, the reason why I have those calls, though, is because if this thing runs, I'm still covered on the upside. If this thing goes and breaks down, I can re-enter back down here at a reasonable level, or even if, I don't think this one's going to fill, the $2 one. I've got orders down there. I just don't know if they're going to fill. But at this point right now, I think what's going to happen is this stock's going to have to move up, and they have canceled the ATM at this point. So this is going to get interesting because the float is so small that, like, the only thing I tell you is this. The one downside to the stock price being up here is that not everyone can afford thousands of shares like it was like when it was down here, right? So when people actually sat there and were buying down here sub-dollar, it was easy to pick up 1,000 shares, 2,000 shares. When it's up here at like $5, $6, $7, it's a lot harder for retail to, grasp control of that entire float. So that's the one downside. But I will tell you this. At this point right now, this does look like it could possibly squeeze. Small float, retail's interested. As long as they keep momentum going and keep retail kind of engaged and like keep kind of getting in the face, everyone thinks this guy's a con artist. Is it true? I don't know. I can tell you this. It's not entirely altruistic, right? He has 9 million shares of this company, and the higher it goes, the richer he is, right? That means he can take out bigger loans. He can do, there's a lot of upside for him. So I don't think this is entirely altruistic. But at the same time, I do think he's doing a good job of marketing, essentially. He's getting the name out there. He's engaging with people who have bigger audiences than him to kind of get his name out there. And retail's taking notice of that, which means that even if retail started throwing in, let's break down real quick the float. Right, so if they have right now, the float's going to be around 20, let's just call it 24 million, right? If you have 24 million shares, hold on a second. So you got 24 million shares, right? And let's just say there's 50,000 people out there in the entire world that can have access to this stock that bought in. If each one of them owned 480 shares of the stock, that would lock up the entire free float. That's why having a small float is, it's easier to basically cause a squeeze on a stock that has a small float than it is to have a stock that's like a billion shares. Like, I don't know if you know this, but like a ticker like Nokia, right? I just want to see if I can pull it up here. Yeah, Nokia has, I believe, it doesn't show you the shares outstanding, but if I remember correctly, I think it's like a couple billion shares outstanding. Here we go. Yeah, they've got like 5.6 billion. No, it's even higher than that, right? It's like, yeah, 5.6 billion shares outstanding. Like, that's a stock that probably will never squeeze. Let me go back to GNS. Okay. He has, now let's be honest. I think Roger is a bit of a used car salesman, and it wouldn't shock me if he has bot followers on Twitter, because if you look at his user growth, I think there's a. I want to see something real quick. I want to see. Someone told me there is like a social media, Social Blade, I think it's called. Okay. So let's put in Roger Hamilton, right? Let's see if this is him. No, is that him? No, that's not him. Hold on. What's his YouTube name? It's Roger James Hamilton, right? And his handle here, we'll just put in this. Go back to here. So if we go back and put in YouTube, this guy, right? If we went to like, well, let's see. I'm trying to remember how to use the site. We need to go back in history because I want to see where he got his growths. And I don't think I am not paid, so I'm guessing they're going to make me watch an ad or do something. But I want to go back further because the growth from when he started seemed really, really like out of sorts he wasn't getting the amount of attention he is now. So I do think there's a lot of people who, will pay some money to get some spots. Once people see you have a high amount of like followers, they might follow you too, thinking you must know something. That's what a lot of these like people do. Obviously, I don't have that because, anyone that's with me is, at least they know I've grown very, very slowly. So seeing Grant, his message right now is like getting a ton of attention, but I wanted to go back and just see his original user growth because like, I can tell you right now, let's do Twitter. That's the one I wanted to know because that's what I think you were talking about, 900 followers on Twitter. So let's pull up him on Twitter real quick. Because that's where I think the bots are. The YouTube things may actually be pretty legitimate, but let's take a look at this. Because this is where I think he has a lot of bots. Because Twitter is just full of bots. Right? I want to see longer history, though. That's the only thing that sucks about this is... Like, look at this. Like, he was literally, like, losing 2,000, 3,000, 14,000 followers, which he probably was not paying for his bots, so they were, like, going down. So I don't think his growth was organic. I think he literally was, like, paying for bots. And then essentially what happened was he hit the newsstands with this, and then all of a sudden he spiked. Look at this. So he was losing 7,000 followers in November of 2022. He lost 14,000 followers in 2018. I don't think these numbers were legit, to be honest with you. What I will tell you is let's assume this. Let's assume all of a sudden he hit this peak in January where he gained 17,000 followers, right? So let's pretend on top of that he had maybe 100,000 followers. And so we'll call it 117,000 followers, perhaps. I just think his stuff didn't look right when I was looking at it because I was researching a little bit and none of it kind of tracked. So just telling you now, I'm pretty sure numbers like this, like who loses 14,000 followers in a month? Like, it just some of these things didn't look right when I was looking at them because I wanted to research a little bit. But I do think he's actually getting some real followers now, like actual people. So I think he may have been paying for like bots to kind of grow his like awareness and brand, and then people were like, oh, who is this guy? But he hit it big in January and like into February when he basically started getting his face all over the Fox News and national media. So that's where I think essentially these guys went out, and now they're doing a lot of really good marketing. No matter what, now his company is in the papers. He's in the papers. It's the only way to get past the algorithm. Yeah, I mean, like, so I think he's legitimately gaining traction now. So if this keeps up, it doesn't take a lot. Like if, like I said, like if 50,000 people had 480 shares, the entire float's locked up because he owns 9 million shares himself. There's another guy that owns like 3.5 million. And I mean, overall, I don't think anyone sold that I've seen. There's been no filings that I saw that anyone bailed out. So it's still very much now. Here's the real question: is what is now the short interest on this thing, right? So cost of just updated. Sorry, cost of borrow is still very high. It's not as high as it was. I think at peak it was like 280%. Yeah, 280s here, 280s, 280s, 280s. So once they got access to some shares, no, it was over 300, wasn't it? Yeah, that was close to 400%. So back before they got some of these shares, when they unlocked it through that clause and hidden inside their S3, that kind of flooded the market with it, right? So it looks right now like some people are closing out their shorts, right? So they're saying that the live short interest is still under 1 million, which is kind of nuts. Utilization should have spiked. Yeah, it spiked back up. So, I mean, I think this is going to take longer than most people think, So if you look, all of a sudden now we have 2 million shares short, right? But that's now only 20% of the float. So it's not quite gotten to the point where it's like squeezy, but it's getting there. If this continues down the road for a while, are we not seeing any FTDs yet? It's not on threshold yet. So I still think there's shares on like out there right now. It's going to basically just boil down to, does retail stick around long enough for this thing to actually squeeze? Do cow. Okay. But yeah, I was going to say, at this point right now, I think if retail stays on this thing and just, if it does drop down, fill some of these gaps, if, people don't freak out. The biggest problem is this. Retail that bought down here is going to take profit at some point up here if they think that they're going to start losing all that money, or they're going to diamond hands. And, but it's harder to convince, people to do that anymore since GME happened, we haven't seen a whole lot of evidence that, any of these things can really move past that. We'll see at some point, but at this point right now, even GME, who they're literally DRSing the shares, locking them up, that has not been, it's not sent the stock to the moon. It has reduced some of the liquidity on the market, but, All right, let's do cow real quick. But yeah, my overall thoughts are GNS still could have another leg up, just, depending, but it's 20% short right now. It's not, it can move up if it needs to, but let's go to cow real quick. So big gap up there. It's been basically just flatlining there. Was that a gap there? Looks like there's a gap there too. Right here, there's a gap. Let me zoom in a bit because it's, yeah, a gap down here. Did it fill? I guess it did fill there, didn't it? Yeah, it filled that gap. So that gap's not there. So it literally just has this gap up here at, what is that, 5? Did they do like some sort of split? Yeah, there was a split here, right? Yeah, 100 to 1, 100 to 1 split, right? Okay. Let's pull up Cal. It's a small float. It's a very small float. There is, though, it looks like warrants. Yeah, there are warrants up here at $6.76. Let's see. They're cashless for half each warrant by December 14th. The company intends to amend such provisions to permit consenting holders to exercise their Class A warrants by means of an alternate cashless exercise from the date that Class A warrants are so amended through the 44th day, the anniversary of the initial exercise price, which is December 14th. So what day are we on right now? Or you know what I can do? We'll just type in how many days since, what was it, December 14th? So it's been 62 days since December 14th. Which is December, else cashless after 100 days after offering for reset to a 6.76. What was it here? After split. All right. So that one's interesting because that means they still also, I'm just looking. There's 144 warrants there at an exercise price of 50. Nah, that's never going to happen. Are these split adjusted numbers? Yeah, I'm just wondering, are these split adjusted, though? I mean, it looks like they're out of money. Like, they need to raise cash badly. So, there was an S1 offering here. Right? Final pricing was 14 cents. Shares offered 68 million. Exercise price of 14 cents. So they priced this one in. So let's take a look. All right, so they're going to give up to 15 million units consisting of ordinary shares or pre-funded warrants. What date was this? October last year. All right, so this is we are offering the purchaser units that would elsewise result in the purchaser's beneficial ownership exceeding 4.99% of. Or it could be increased up to the basically 9.99. All right, and they're going to receive 7% of the public offering price. So that's their built-in profit. All right, so they actually have the Cal warrants under Cal WW. So there are the warrants, right? The warrants did have a nice spike there. Dirty says they have money. Let's check. Updated. They're out of cash, though. That's their problem. Their receivables went down. Right? The receivables went down slightly. Their inventory's higher. Yeah, I mean, they just sold their sister European company. Do you know what they got for it, Dirty? Like cash-wise? Because this is obviously the quarterly, but is there any news? All right. How much money, though? How much cash are they getting for this thing? It's an effort to bring Clara to cash flow positive. Come on, tell me how much they sold it for. So terms have not been agreed to yet, is what I'm seeing. Yeah. So it really depends on how much money they're going to get from this thing. That's going to be key. Because if they have enough cash, then that's going to be fine. But at this point right now, until we find out how much cash they are, it's going to be hard to determine how much like runway they have. Right? I would say this one right now, I would probably put in a higher risk, because obviously the shares outstanding are really low, but at the same time, will they go up and try to unlock those warrants? What's going to end up happening is we need to find out how much money they get for their other company, their European company selling off, and how that's going to basically affect their runway. Because right now they need the money really badly, which is why they probably started that deal. But until we actually see it, I would put this in the higher risk. It's probably high reward too. Yeah, so it's risky, is what I would tell you. It's high risk, high reward. Because if this thing does start to move up because the float's so small, I mean, right now they're about 10% short interest. We'll confirm that. All right, Calandra. All right, let's take a look. They are on the threshold list, though, which means that they're having liquidity issues. Utilization is still pretty high. Cost to borrow should be high. Yeah, cost to borrow is over 200%. So really, this is one of those that it could pop. If they can't find the shares before they're just going to run it up and just unlock those warrants to get some liquidity back. Yeah, so once again, like depending on how much they get for the sale, if they gives them enough runway, at that point they could pop. So this is one of those that's high risk, high reward. I mean, tiny float though. So yeah, this one could pop. It's just a little bit higher risk, but this is one of those that nobody knows who they are until all of a sudden they pop off to what's the share price right now? Like $7, $6, something like that. What is this? Like 5. What was their volume like today? 30. It was up 35% on heavy volume. Yeah, I mean they can definitely move. They're gonna have to basically push it up at some point, I think, to get some liquidity back from those warrants. They've got earnings coming up. We'll probably find a little bit more information out. That's on looks like February 16th, which is what, next week? No, that's this week, isn't it? That's like 2 days away. Today's Valentine's Day. So, yeah, we're gonna find out in some information pretty quickly. So, yeah, I like it. Yeah, so I think you're going to see volume start increasing on this thing, especially how small the float is, and it's going to be one of those that all of a sudden you could just see a big green, like one of these right here, just boom, pops up, and then they might unlock the warrants, and then it will go back down. But it's, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Someone asked about Mara. Mara is what? That's like a Bitcoin one, right? Yeah, Marathon Digital, right? Has to do with like Bitcoin or something. Yeah, they mine crypto. Okay, so right now the biggest concern is it looks like they've got an ATM registered right now. It can raise a total of 750 million. Looks like that's a fair amount of dilution. I don't see the numbers going though, but it looks like they're burning roughly about 28 million. They got about 2 years of cash left based off that cash burn, but it looks like they're trying to maybe expand. So the cash need's not as high, but at the same time, they have diluted in the past to raise that money. There's a high amount of short interest against it. Let's take a look at their short interest real quick. I guess billionaire George Soros dives deeper. I'm just curious. So is he in on this? I didn't see who the holders are, but insiders are buying. I can tell you that. But it does look like at some point, if they do pop, it's going to be. They've got about 40% of the float shorted right now. What did they say here? 41. They think it's 41. So that lines up perfectly. So here's what I'll tell you. They may spike and they may run a bit, and then they're going to probably issue out the ATM into them. But you can probably swing trade this. Not financial advice, but you could probably swing trade this. It's already kind of recovered, though, a bit. I'm guessing the RSI probably was really high in this range. So it needs to cool down a bit, but if it consolidates here around like the $5 mark, I would imagine it's going to probably take another run up, and they can probably run it for, you might be able to retest some of these, maybe into the early teens, and then they'll probably start issuing out the ATM. That's what I'd say. The biggest concern is basically that it looks like they want to raise more money because they have this active ATM going. So I don't think it's going to be a moonshot, but it's one of those that you can, if you know what you're doing and you can understand, hey, I'm not going to get super greedy on this thing, you could probably play it for a nice little chunk of change. That's what I'd tell you guys. All right. Let's see. It's 11:25. Is there anything else that we need to cover? I did want to say one thing. I just want to go to. I know Booksy had mentioned AMC. He thinks they're going to go and take a run. They've got a vote, I think, about the ape stuff coming up on, it looks like, March 2nd. I'm not interested in these ones, but it does look like they've been kind of hammered down recently. Since that, we had a couple days where it nicely came up. It's been hammered down. So if you look in the past, kind of, just looking, hammer down, run, hammer down, slight run, hammer down, and now we could see a swing to the upside, maybe back up to like retest this. Was about 7 something? Yeah, I could see that. I know he was saying that that's what kind of he's expecting is a nice big swing up, and then once they start, the ape stuff, then that will probably come back down. But I think they have enough to pass on it, which means that it should have some downward pressure after that goes, but they'll convert for a good chunk of change. So we'll see how much they end up raising off that. But I do believe those are preferred convertibles, I think. Or there's some sort of convertible notes on those, right? Let me see. If conversion approvals or is approved, they'll go through a 10-to-1 reverse split, and 930 ape will be converted into 93 million AMC, which will go ahead and turn AMC will turn into 51 million. So they'll raise right now for combined. So it looks like 144 million AMC's shares after conversion, right? So if we look at how many shares outstanding, so is that 1 billion? Yeah, so they have over 1 billion shares right now. So this is saying it will add another 144 million after the conversion. So, but it will raise some money for the company, which will help because they do need to pay down a bunch of debt. Let's take a look. I just want to see I haven't looked at their last financials in a while, so the revenues had grown, which is good. So total revenues was up from September of the year prior, but that was kind of still COVID time, so they are recovering in that sense. The one thing I want to figure out, though, is let's take a look real quick at they're still losing money. Their operating costs have gone up. That's to be expected, though, because they're probably actually restaffing and, people are coming back, so they need extra things to come into the theaters. Their food and beverage costs went up, though, quite a bit. Their rent actually went up slightly, too. Yeah, I mean, this is a company that still needs a lot of help. But I mean, that will be a nice chunk of change to start paying down some debt. But there's still a good amount of debt. Yeah, I mean, you're looking at 11 million in total liabilities. It's gone down slightly. I mean, that is at least encouraging there, but like your assets are still less than your liabilities, so you have negative shareholder equity, and you're adding more shares out there. So they're still going to need a really, really good, hopefully there's nothing but blockbusters and people just keep going to the movies. But at this point right now, they were in such a bad hole. They're basically diluting themselves out of the hole, but through basically apes. Like apes are basically paying for their recovery. And it's all through shareholder equity. So, I have my own feelings about ATER, and I think, I'm not a fan of his. There was a point where they could have like actually squeezed here, and he sold the ATM way too early, and he basically gave everybody an out. So, all right, yeah, and that gap, is that gap filled yet at $2? And I don't think that gap ever filled. I'd be interested in that as well. Let's see if this gap ever fills. If it does, I might make an entry with like a leap long term around that time frame. In the short term, if it does swing back up, I mean, you could swing it if you wanted to, but I mean, none of this is financial advice. I don't really care what you guys do. I'm just looking at it because Booksy was talking about the fractals on it. Looked like there was going to be a move up before probably the earnings, which is coming up. What do we say? On the 2nd? So could have one more swing going into earnings. It would make sense. A lot of times stocks run up before earnings and then they fade from there. So, and let's take a look at GME real quick. Yeah, so I believe I made this. This was that 22, right? This has been this interesting kind of like, it seems to want to hang out in this level. Like it's been trading above that, but this is where I think a lot of like it broke down, recovered. Now it's consolidating roughly around this 22. There's still this gap up here at 72, which hasn't filled. But I mean, what I think is going to end up happening is this. You're going to have to, this is going to be a long road because it's going to take a while for retail to lock up the entire float. You will see how fast the numbers are growing, but I think they're slowing down because I think retail is literally running out of ammo. And because it hasn't squeezed or done anything, it's essentially just going to continue being this longer term. I do think it can move at some point, but it's just, I know people wanted a quick, like, oh, this thing's going to go to the moon, and that's not, this is a battle. So at some point in the future, as they lock up this stuff, and as long as they're not burning too much cash, I know they said that on the last earnings call, they were going to try to reduce that. So, but as the stock prices came down after the split, people were able to buy more. So, yeah, I do think at some point this is going to go back up. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Oh, hold on. I just realized I was stuck on my chat. I didn't see people talking. All right, hold on. What's up, Hustle? How are you, bud? NEP. I'll do NEP real quick. Wasn't that one of the ones we said was interesting, or was that one of the ones that was a bunch of gaps up here? Yeah, this is the one that was out of money. And they've got a fair amount of dilution here. The warrants are at 162. The share price right now is at 68 cents. But they need to raise money. So we will see. Because it looks like, but this is one of those armistice ones. So could they run up to, to push that up to the exercise price? These guys will get their shares, perhaps unload them. So could you see a short-term run on this? Sure. But at this point right now, they really need the money. So if it does move up, it's not going to be for long because they're going to basically issue out those warrants, and all of a sudden the shares outstanding are going to really, really increase. Small float, so it's possible you can have a massive move up really quickly. But once you get over $1.62, it's going to basically be them unlocking, maybe pushing up a little bit slightly higher, and then probably dumping out. I'll look. Last one would be TKS. I don't know much about this one. Or TSK, right? Or no, TKS. Nope, not that. TKS. Yeah, I don't know anything about this one. They don't even have it registered. Based out of Thailand. 6 billion market cap. Is that right? Am I looking at the right one? They are a print media or printing media business. They do e-services, business forms, stock forms, flexible packaging and labels. I mean, they're a big company. They actually have a dividend. What I can tell you is this. They have an earnings coming up. Positive there. Cash flow is going down slightly. Let's see. They have been contracting, though, for year-over-year growth, for quarter-over-quarter growth. Operating income has increased, though. Is that though? Let's see. Third quarter was good there. Third quarter was bad there. Second quarter was bad there. Second quarter was good here. It looks like they're just kind of like... I don't know. I'm just worried that if the entire market dumps, this is going to be something that goes down with it. TKS. I mean, it's pretty algorithmically traded. It has a gap there, but it filled. There's a gap here, though, down at 7. There's a bull gap here. So if I was looking for entries, I would probably be looking around the 720 mark for an entry. But this is one that, if you got it down there at those prices, because this gap already filled. So yeah, I mean, if I was gonna bet, I would be looking at roughly this range right here. That's where I'd be looking for an entry for me. So, all right. Well, I think I'm going to wrap it up for tonight. But you guys have a great evening. I'll talk to you guys in the Discord tomorrow. I think I'll be a little bit more active tomorrow. I've got a couple more filings to do, a couple things to review, and I'm trying to add new things to the server. We added a news bot, and I'm going to try to see if I can. I'm going to try to work on learning Python a little bit just to see if I can get some things into the Discord to be able to push out notifications and stuff like that. For if we see like high volume, it's going to take a while, is what I'll tell you. But the goal is going to be basically improving the Discord that we have and trying to add features that, make it at least, interesting to see if we can find different scanners that we can push out through a bot. And I think that's kind of the goal is going to be us growing and trying to figure out things and trying to get a little more effective way of, getting information out to people. And hopefully we can actually kind of build something out that's pretty cool. So if anyone has any programming experience, you can always DM me and we can kind of talk about what we're looking at. But I think at this point right now, I can't rely on anyone else to do that. So I'm going to have to figure out if I can learn it or if, we'll figure it out. But you guys have a great evening. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow, and you guys have a great night.